He was just an exhausted office worker looking for a little escape when death threw him straight into the body of Shameless Veiler, the vicious male Omega villain of a historical ABO novel he had already read to the end. Shameless was supposed to manipulate the court, force the Alpha King's attraction, and eventually die for his crimes. Lywin had a better plan. Stop competing, stop scheming, eat whatever he wanted, sleep whenever he wanted, and stay as far away from Alpha King Levin as possible. Unfortunately, the less he tried to win the king, the more Levin started watching him. And soon, Lywin would discover that the ending he remembered was hiding a much darker truth. Now let's begin. Lywin Ardle had spent 3 years making other people look competent. He fixed corrupted reports 5 minutes before meetings, rebuilt schedules after managers forgot their own deadlines, and answered messages that began with quick question and ended with 2 hours of unpaid work. At 27, he had learned that the most dangerous sentence in an office was not "you're fired." It was "you're good at this, so can you handle one more thing?" His one reliable escape was a historical ABO web novel a coworker had shoved at him during lunch. The Crown Beneath Winter Pine was ridiculous, addictive, and almost offensively dramatic. Lywin read all 312 chapters on trains, in elevators, and in bed with one eye closing. He hated one character more than anyone else. Shameless Veiler, the male Omega villain who had wealth, servants, silk robes, private gardens, and somehow still chose to spend every waking hour ruining lives so he could become the Alpha King's mate. Lywin had once thrown his phone onto the pillow and muttered, "You could literally be sleeping right now." 2 weeks later, while leaving work early for once, he stepped through the marble lobby of a neighboring office tower just as a badly secured decorative glass panel broke loose from a renovation frame overhead. He heard a crack, someone shout, and then nothing. He woke to the smell of medicinal herbs and expensive incense. Silk pressed cool against his bare forearms. Someone was crying beside the bed. Lywin opened his eyes and found a painted ceiling 3 stories higher than any ceiling had a right to be. A young servant in pale green robes dropped to his knees so fast his forehead struck the floor. "Lord Shameless." Thank the heavens. Lywin stared at him. Then memory that did not belong to him came hard and fast. A noble house, a mother with jeweled hairpins and a careful smile, a royal court, a scent registry, a king with a winter pine scent, an argument beside an ornamental lake. His stomach dropped. He looked down at his own hands. Long fingers, smooth skin, a silver family ring on the right index finger. Not his body. Shameless Veiler's body. The villain. The man Lywin had cursed through hundreds of chapters. For several seconds he could only hear his own pulse. Then a second thought arrived, brutally practical. The royal pairing rite had not happened yet. Uri Solin's public humiliation had not happened yet. The forged compatibility scandal had not happened yet. He was early. He was alive. And most importantly, Shameless's private quarters contained a bed large enough to sleep sideways in. By sunset, half of Veiler Palace believed their young lord had suffered permanent brain damage. Shameless had dismissed the etiquette instructor, returned 3 sealed invitations to the crown mate selection unopened, ordered the kitchen to send whatever dish required the least ceremonial presentation, and removed 6 ornamental pins from his hair because they gave him a headache. When his personal attendant Turin timidly reminded him that the original Shameless never ate before being fully dressed, Lywin looked at the tray of roasted river fish, pulled one crisp piece free with his fingers, and said, "Then the original Shameless wasted a lot of hot food." Turin nearly dropped the teapot. Later, Lywin found a shaded platform behind the western courtyard, dragged 2 floor cushions into a pile, and lay there in a loose cream robe while servants whispered from behind carved screens. A memory surfaced of Shameless ordering a boy caned for spilling scented oil on one sleeve. Lywin's appetite vanished. He sat up. "Turin." The servant appeared instantly, shoulders tight. "Yes, my lord." The boy who used to work in the scent room. Dark hair. Scar on his chin. Turin's face went pale. "Morrow. Bring him back if he wants the job. Double his previous pay. If he doesn't want to return, give him the money anyway." Turin stared. Lywin rubbed his temple. And stop looking at me like I've grown antlers. I'm trying something new. What, my lord? Not being terrible. The palace had not yet recovered from that announcement when King Lewin arrived the next morning without warning. The outer court erupted into disciplined panic. Lywin did not. He had been asleep in the garden with one foot hanging off a cushion and a half-read book over his face. Turin hissed, "My lord, his majesty is here." Lywin lifted the book just enough to see the servant's horrified expression. "Does he need me? He is the king." "That doesn't answer the question." Boots sounded on stone. Lywin sat up because being executed in Chapter 12 would be embarrassing. Lewin stepped under the shade awning in a dark blue military coat rather than ceremonial robes. The novel had spent an unreasonable amount of time describing him. Lywin reluctantly admitted the author had not exaggerated. Lewin was broad through the shoulders, with deep brown hair cut shorter than court fashion and amber gold eyes that looked warmer in color than they felt in practice. He was not the black-haired, silver-eyed fantasy Lywin had pictured while reading. He looked more grounded, more physical, and much more tired. A thin scar crossed the side of his chin. His scent reached Lywin a moment later. Pine resin, bergamot, warm spice. Lywin's omega body registered alpha before his mind could intervene. A brief tightening low in his stomach. He ignored it. Biology could file a complaint. Lewin stopped 3 steps away. His gaze moved from Kaelus's bare feet to the open collar of his robe, then to the fruit bowl balanced on a book. "You withdrew from the crown mate selection." "Yes." "You dismissed your etiquette master." "Also yes." "You returned 2 gifts from my household." Lywin frowned. "Were they edible?" Lewin's eyes narrowed. "No, then yes." Silence spread across the courtyard. Turin looked ready to faint. Lewin said, 3 months ago you threatened to have an Omega's family removed from the capital because he danced with me at a harvest reception." A cold thread ran through Lywin. He remembered reading that chapter and laughing at how monstrous Kaelus was. Now the memory sat inside this body like a bruise. That was wrong. Lewin's expression did not shift, but his attention sharpened. "You expect me to believe you simply changed your mind?" Lywin looked at the pillow behind him, then back at the king. "Believe whatever takes the least paperwork." Something almost happened at the corner of Lewin's mouth. It disappeared before Lywin could be sure. "Come to the registry annex at noon." "Why?" "Because several compatibility records have been altered, and your authorization appears on 2 of them." Lywin's good mood died. "Ah." Lewin turned. "Do not be late." "What if I'm sleeping?" Lewin looked back over one shoulder. "Then I will have you carried there." Lywin watched him leave and thought with deep irritation, so the novel really did make the workaholic terrifyingly attractive. Unfair. The Royal Concord Registry occupied a long stone building behind the medical conservatory. Lywin arrived at 12:10 with a pastry wrapped in cloth and no apology. Lewin stood beside a table covered in ledgers. 2 clerks avoided Kaelus's eyes. Uri Solon was not present, which Lywin considered a blessing. Lewin pointed to 3 files. These all received revised compatibility ratings within the same month. Different families, different physicians, different original scores. Lywin skimmed the pages. Kaelus's old memories knew the forms immediately. Registry stamp, physician seal, house witness, secondary review. His modern office brain saw something else. Whoever changed these is lazy. One clerk blinked. Lewin folded his arms. "Explain." Lywin tapped the bottom corners. "The physicians are different, but the correction codes were generated in the same sequence. See? 41, 42, 43. That means the amendments were processed as one batch before they were distributed to separate files." Lewin leaned closer. Lywin caught the scent of bergamot and forced himself to keep reading. "And all 3 have the same witness routing mark." His finger stopped. A small V-shaped stamp sat beside the final notation. "Valor Sponsorship Office." Lywin's mouth went dry. Kaelus's house. Levin watched him see it. Still sleepy? Suddenly less. Levin did not accuse him. That was almost worse. For the next week, he required Kalis at the registry every afternoon. Lywin complained constantly and worked efficiently anyway. He moved duplicate ledgers off the central table, labeled pending reviews by category, and asked why 6 clerks copied the same information by hand when one master list would do. The chief clerk answered, "Tradition." Lywin stared at him. "Tradition is not a filing system." Levin looked down quickly, but Lywin caught the brief curve of his mouth. The king began leaving tasks in front of him without explanation. Lywin began returning them with blunt notes. "Redundant, wrong department already solved, ask someone paid for this." On the 4th day Levin placed an unsigned decree beside his tea. "Review it." Lywin read the first page, the second, and then pushed it back. No. The allocation assumes these compatibility rankings are valid. We just established that some rankings may be false. If you sign this, 3 estates can argue that royal policy was built on manipulated medical information." Levin stared at him for a long second, then tore the signature page in half. "You prevented a very expensive problem." Lywin bit into his pastry. "You're welcome. You could show humility." "I could. But we're already behind schedule." This time Levin actually laughed, one short sound that startled both clerks. The first time Lywin met Uriai Solon in this life, his mouth went dry before the other Omega even spoke. Uriai was nothing like the fragile White Lotus fan art that had circulated around the novel. He was lean, sharp-eyed, with copper-brown hair tied low and ink stains on 2 fingers. He carried a box of dried plant samples under one arm. When he saw Kalis, every muscle in his face went still. Lord Vaylor. Lywin remembered the chapter where Kalis had bribed an event steward to switch Uriai's invitation, then publicly accused him of entering a restricted royal ceremony without permission. Uriai had lost his research grant for 6 months. Lywin set down the report he was holding. "I owe you an apology." Uriai's brows rose. Levin, standing near the window, said nothing. Lywin continued, "What I did at the winter reception was deliberate. The invitation was changed because of me. The complaint against your laboratory was also mine." Uriai's jaw tightened. "You remember?" "Yes. And now I'm telling you it was wrong. You don't have to forgive me." Uriai studied him long enough to make Lywin uncomfortable. "I don't. Fair. But I need access to your house's scent procurement records." Lywin nodded. "Also fair." Levin's gaze stayed on him after Uriai turned away. Uriai's role cracked one of Lywin's strongest assumptions about the book. In the novel, Uriai and Levin had shared dozens of private meetings. Lywin had read them as romantic setup. In reality, Uriai was a scent chemist. Those meetings had been about stabilizers, catalytic compounds, and false compatibility reactions. "So you and Levin never..." Lywin began while they sorted sealed samples. Uriai looked up. "Never what?" "Nothing. Were you about to ask whether I slept with the king?" "I was trying to be subtle." "You failed." From the next table Levin said, without looking up, "Completely." Lywin nearly dropped a vial. Uriai smirked. That night, walking back through the covered corridor, Lywin thought about how much of the story he had treated as fact simply because a narrator placed 2 people in the same room. The thought should have comforted him. Instead, it made the ending more frightening. If the novel had been wrong about Uriai, what else had it been wrong about? The 3 of them developed a working rhythm that would have horrified the original novel. Uriai distrusted Kalis but enjoyed correcting him. Levin trusted Uriai's science and Kalis's instinct for systems, which meant he was frequently outnumbered. During one afternoon session, Uriai pushed a tray of scent samples toward Levin. "Smell these." Levin frowned. "Why?" "Because one of them contains the masking agent used in the false evaluations." Kalis looked up from his ledger. "This is the most expensive wine tasting I've ever seen." "They are not wine." "That explains the terrible service." Uriai threw a cork at him. Levin caught it without looking. Kalis stared. "Show off." Levin finally smiled, and Uriai's expression shifted for half a second, as if seeing something he had not expected from the king. Lywin noticed. So did Levin. Neither commented. Lady Saren Vaylor arrived 3 days later. She embraced Kalis in front of the servants, palms warm against his shoulders, and for one dangerous minute Lywin understood why Kalis had obeyed her so completely. Saren did not look like a villain. She looked elegant, tired, and genuinely relieved to see her son healthy. Over tea, she listened while Kalis explained that he no longer wanted to enter the crown mate selection. She did not shout. Then you will not. Lywin blinked. Too easy. Saren stirred honey into her cup. I have spoken with House Dastral. Rovin is an alpha of good standing. Their eastern ports need Vaylor grain contracts, and our family needs representation outside the capital. A courtship would stabilize both. No, Saren's spoon stopped. You have not met him properly. Still no. Her smile softened in a way that made Lywin's skin prickle. You are tired. I understand. But you cannot abandon every structure because you dislike the weight of it. Watch me. For the first time, something cold showed behind her eyes. The Vaylor trusts, voting rights, and succession allowances remain under family oversight until your 26th year. Cannot force a bond. I can make independence inconvenient. There it was. Not a cage with bars. A cage made of contracts. Levin heard about the Dastral arrangement before sunset. Lywin found him in the archive room reading a sealed Vaylor notice with a look that could have cut glass. You opened my mail? It was delivered to the Crown Registry because it affects a royal candidacy. Convenient. Levin set it down. I can void this. Lywin looked at him. With one decree? Yes. Then why haven't you? Levin's jaw shifted. Because you have not asked me to. You know I don't want it. That is not the same as asking me to replace your mother's decision with mine. Lywin stared. Levin moved closer but stopped outside touching distance. If I free you from one cage by putting you inside another, I have solved nothing. For once Lywin had no sarcastic answer. His Omega body noticed the Alpha standing near him, but the physical awareness was almost background noise compared with the pressure in his chest. This man could solve the problem with power and was choosing not to use it because Lywin had not given him permission. Kalis' old memories had no category for that. Rovin Dastral complicated matters further by being reasonable. He arrived without guards, wore travel leathers instead of formal court clothing, and looked embarrassed the moment Kalis told him the arrangement had not been voluntary. Your mother gave me a letter with your seal. Lywin's stomach tightened. Rovin produced it. The signature was Kalis's. Old. Copied from another agreement. I did not write this. I believe you. Rovin folded the letter. There is something else. My family's compatibility evaluation was revised last winter. I assumed it was routine. The revision increased my score with 3 Vaylor-aligned Omegas by nearly 20%. Lywin's hands went still. Who approved it? A registry keeper named Oren Tal. The name tugged at Lywin's memory. He had skimmed those chapters. 6 pages of procedural politics. He had been eating noodles and half asleep. Damn it. This was exactly the chapter he had skipped. That evening Lywin found Levin alone on the upper terrace of the conservatory. The king had removed his coat and rolled his sleeves to the forearms. The sight was annoyingly distracting. Lywin leaned on the stone rail. Why didn't you ever claim Kalis? Levin looked at him. You are Kalis. Lywin's heart stumbled. Of course. He had to be careful. I mean before. When I was trying very hard. Trying? Fine. Being unbearable. Levin's expression sharpened with old memory. Because wanting the crown and wanting me were never the same thing. You still reacted to me at the pairing right. Levin's face closed instantly. Lywin regretted the question, but he needed the answer. That reaction was not affection, Levin said. It was chemical. I learned that later. Shame moved through Kalis's borrowed body like remembered sickness. Lywin looked away. Levin added quieter. Whatever you are doing now, it is not that. What am I doing now? Annoying me. Lywin snorted. Levin's mouth softened. Making me leave meetings on time. Making me eat lunch. Arguing with me when everyone else bows. Treating me like a man who can be tired instead of an alpha who must always be certain. He stepped closer. I want that only while you are free to stop giving it. Lywin's breath caught. Levin's voice dropped. I want you only while you are still free to leave. Lywin kissed him before he could think himself out of it. He caught Levin's shirt and pulled him down. Levin froze for one heartbeat, then answered, one hand settling carefully at Lywin's waist. The kiss deepened just enough to leave them both breathless before Lywin pulled back. What hit him hardest was not scent or instinct. It was the simple fact that he had chosen the distance, and Levin had chosen to meet him there. You kissed me, Levin murmured. I noticed. The memory came back that night without warning. Lywin woke with Kailas's heart pounding and the taste of bitter spice at the back of his throat. A silver vial. Saren's hand closing his fingers around it. Kailas pouring 3 drops into a ceremonial diffuser before the royal pairing rite. His own old voice whispering, if the king reacts to me in front of the court, no one will question the match. Lywin sat upright, sick. The novel had said Kailas used a forbidden scent catalyst. Reading it had been one thing. Remembering the satisfaction in Kailas's body was another. He stumbled to the wash basin and splashed cold water over his face. He had kissed Levin only hours earlier. The same man this body had once chemically cornered. In the mirror, Kailas's face looked pale and unfamiliar. Lywin gripped the basin. You really were awful, he whispered to the dead man whose life he now wore. For 4 days he avoided Levin. He sent registry notes through Turin, ate in his own rooms, and claimed headaches whenever the king requested his presence. On the 5th day Levin appeared in Kailas's private sitting room and closed the door behind him. Lywin was stretched on a couch pretending to read. If you're here about the TAL records, they're on the table. I am here because you are hiding. I'm resting. You rest loudly. Lywin lowered the book. Levin's face was controlled, but his hands were tight at his sides. Tell me what changed. Lywin almost joked. The joke died before reaching his mouth. I remembered the catalyst. Levin did not move. All of it. Enough. Shame made Lywin's voice rough. I remembered wanting you to react. Wanting the court to see it. Wanting to take your choice away because Kailas thought winning mattered more than what you wanted. Levin's gaze stayed on him. Lywin pushed to his feet. You should hate me. I did. The answer hit hard because Levin did not soften it. For a long time, Lywin swallowed. Levin continued. I hated what you did. I hated being made uncertain of my own body. I hated that every glance toward you afterward made me wonder whether it was mine. Lywin turned away. Then this is insane. What is? Us. He gestured between them. This body did that to you. And you have spent weeks refusing to use me even when doing so would solve your problems. That doesn't erase it. No, Levin stepped closer. Nothing erases it. Lywin looked at him. Levin's voice stayed level. You apologized to Uriai when he had nothing you needed. You restored wages to servants you once punished. You gave me evidence that could have destroyed your own house. You walked away from the crown when everyone expected you to crawl toward it. Because I wanted to sleep. At first, that landed harder than Lywin wanted. Levin's eyes narrowed. You keep calling every good choice laziness because if you admit you care, then you can be hurt by what happens next. Lywin's jaw tightened. You don't know me. Then stop disappearing and let me. The argument ended with Lywin leaving. Levin did not follow. That was worse than being chased. Lywin walked until his feet hurt, circled the Lotus Court twice, and finally sat on the steps behind the archive. No one came to order him back. No guards arrived. No Alpha command pressed against him. Levin had meant what he said. Stay only if leaving remained possible. Lywin stared at his hands. The whole point of this second life had been to avoid the plot. Avoid Levin. Avoid Saren. Avoid responsibility for crimes he had not personally committed. Eat, sleep, survive. Simple. Except Uriai's ruined grant had still been real. Morrow's scars had still been real. Levin's violation at the pairing rite had still been real. Lywin could not demand that everyone recognize him as a different man while refusing to repair anything the old one had broken. He stood, swore under his breath, and went back inside. Saren moved the Dastral announcement forward by 3 weeks. The formal notice arrived at breakfast. Lywin read it, chewed once, and handed it to Turin. Burn that after you make 2 copies. Turin paused. 2 copies, my lord? 1 for evidence. 1 so I can enjoy burning it twice. By afternoon, Rovin had publicly stated he would not complete any bond without Kaelus's direct consent. But House Dastral could not withdraw from the economic agreement without triggering penalties that would cripple several Eastern port projects. Saren had built the trap wider than marriage. Levin offered no decree. Lywin did not ask for one. That night, after a long registry session, he found Levin in the private map room. I know why I was avoiding you, Lywin said. Levin set down his pen. I assumed shame. That too. Lywin closed the door. But mostly fear. He had rehearsed a safer version. It disappeared when Levin looked at him. I have spent this entire time believing I know how you end me. Levin's brow furrowed. Lywin could not tell him I read your life in a web novel without sounding insane, so he shaped the truth around it. After the accident, I started having memories. Not exactly mine. A future where you discover what Kaelus did, choose Uriai, arrest me, and I die in custody. Every time you get close, part of me waits for that ending. Levin came around the table. Do you believe I love Uriai? Not anymore. Do you believe I intend to kill you? Lywin opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Levin stopped in front of him. Forget the man in your visions. Forget the ending. What has the man standing here actually done to you? Dragged me into administrative labor. Levin's eyes flashed. Kaelus. The name struck differently now. It belonged to the body, but Levin said it like it belonged to the person in front of him. Lywin's humor drained away. You gave me choices. Yes. Even when I hated them. Especially then. Lywin looked at his hands. I don't know how to promise I won't run again. Then don't promise. Levin touched his wrist, light enough that Lywin could pull away. Choose once. Then choose again tomorrow. Lywin lifted his eyes. I'm choosing now. That night, after Lywin finally admitted he was choosing the man in front of him rather than fearing the ending he remembered, he and Levin went to the king's private bedroom together. Nothing was rushed. They stayed close, kissed, talked when either of them hesitated, and let the night become intimate only because both men wanted it. Later, with the room quiet and their breathing settled, they chose a mutual mating bond as deliberately as they had chosen everything else. Levin marked Kaelus only after giving him one last chance to change his mind, and Kaelus returned the mark willingly. By the time they fell asleep beside each other, the bond between them was real, permanent, and completely different from the forced attraction Kaelus had once tried to manufacture. For the full uncensored 18+ raw scene, extended chemistry, and Patreon-only private moments and story details, see Patreon through the link in the video description. At 9 precisely, Lady Saren entered the royal private chamber and stopped so abruptly that the attendant behind her nearly walked into her back. Kaelus was still in Levin's bed, hair loose, robe hastily pulled over one shoulder. One boot lay near the couch. The other had somehow ended up beside a tray of untouched breakfast. Levin sat against the headboard in a plain shirt, equally unceremonial. The fresh mating marks at both their necks were impossible to miss. Saren's face did not break. That was almost impressive. Lywin took a piece of toast from the tray. Morning, mother. Her gaze moved from him to Levin. What have you done? Solved the Dastral issue. Lywin bit into the toast. You can cancel the announcement. Levin's hand rested lightly against Lywin's hip under the blanket. Not possessive, simply there. Saren looked at that hand. Then she smiled. You still think Rovan was the plan? Lywin stopped chewing. Saren bowed to Levin with perfect precision. Your Majesty. Congratulations. She left before either man could stop her. By mid-afternoon, the Crown Tribunal had received a sealed evidence packet. Lywin sat in Levin's study while Uriai spread the documents across the table. His stomach tightened with every page. Authorization to alter Uriai's invitation. Real. Payment to a registry clerk. Real. Purchase of the forbidden catalyst. Real. 3 manipulated compatibility records. Real. Then the documents changed. Orders tying Kalis directly to Orental's full network. Instructions for 13 house alliances he had never remembered. A coded ledger naming him as coordinator. Levin stood at the far side of the room, face unreadable. Uriai said, the problem is that whoever built the false section used true documents as the foundation. Lywin rubbed both hands over his face. So if I say I didn't do it, I sound like a liar because half of it is mine. Yes. A guard entered. Your Majesty, the tribunal has formally requested Lord Kalis Vaylor submit to inquiry. Silence landed heavily. Lywin looked at Levin. The ending had found him anyway. Levin recused himself before sunset. Lywin heard the announcement from a tribunal clerk rather than from Levin and stormed into the royal study furious enough to forget etiquette entirely. You removed yourself? Levin dismissed the guards. Yes. Without telling me. The tribunal petition arrived before I could. Convenient. Lywin's voice sharpened. So this is where the future starts matching again? Levin crossed the room. No. It feels familiar. Then listen carefully. Levin stopped in front of him. If I preside over your case after bonding you, every verdict in your favor becomes suspect. Every witness can claim I frightened them. Every record can be dismissed as royal interference. I could protect you with power today and destroy your name permanently. Lywin's anger faltered. Levin continued, I am not stepping away from you. I am stepping away from the chair that would make the truth useless. Lywin looked down. I hate when you make sense. You tell me that often. Because it keeps happening. Levin touched the back of his fingers to Lywin's hand. Do not run. Lywin exhaled. I'm tired of running. The investigation narrowed quickly once they stopped trying to prove everything at once. Uriai handled sent laboratory records. Rovan traced revised compatibility scores through House Dastral and 2 other port families. Lywin focused on registry access. Orental had processed nearly every questionable amendment, but always behind legitimate noble requests. Saren's network had been clever. They did not invent alliances from nothing. They nudged scores, accelerated reviews, buried unfavorable tests, and created the appearance that biology naturally supported politically useful matches. It was elegant enough to survive because everyone wanted to believe the numbers. Lywin sat with 3 ledgers open around him and suddenly recognized a sequence mark from Kalis's memory. This one. Uriai leaned over. What? Tal used temporary keys during seasonal ceremonies. Kalis gave Mother one before the pairing rite. Uriai followed the numbers. If she used it again, there would be a second access record under Kalis's authorization. They found 7. The final piece came from an archive box no one had opened in years. Levin's original criminal investigation into Kalis had been sealed after his death. Because Levin had recused himself from the current tribunal, the chief magistrate allowed Uriai and Kalis supervised access. Lywin recognized the case number immediately from the novel. Chapter 289. Kalis arrested. Chapter 291. Kalis dead during transfer. The book had treated the sequence as obvious. King discovers betrayal, villain dies. Lywin had never questioned the missing page between those events. Inside the archive box lay Levin's signed decree reducing Kalis's sentence from execution review to protected witness custody. Lywin read it twice. His fingers went numb. This says, Uriai's voice softened. He was keeping Kalis alive. Another document listed the transfer route. A later correction redirected the carriage through a Valor-controlled checkpoint. Lywin stared at Saren's family seal beside the route authorization. His breath left him. The novel had never shown this. It had not been a lie exactly. It had simply ended the scene before the truth. The first Bloom assembly took place 2 days later beneath the glass roof of the Royal Conservatory. It was supposed to mark the introduction of Levin's registry reform. Noble houses filled the terraces. Physicians stood beside ceremonial tables. At the center of the hall, a bronze brazier burned fragrant resin, while old compatibility seals were symbolically surrendered before the new rules took effect. Lywin nearly missed the trick because it looked too ceremonial to matter. Saren stood near Orental, both composed. An attendant carried a tray of wrapped seal bundles toward the brazier. Lywin's eye caught the sequence tags. 21, 22, 24. No 23. He looked at the registry inventory in his hand. Bundle 23 contained original amendment ledgers from the winter cycle. Not ceremonial duplicates. Originals. His pulse jumped. Stop! The attendant froze. Conversation died across the conservatory. Saren's eyes found him. Lywin walked toward the brazier. Open that bundle. Orental stepped forward. Lord Kalis, this ceremony is under registry authority. Then you won't mind proving you're not burning evidence. Murmurs moved through the nobles. Tal's face hardened. Saren said, gently, Kalis, you have been under great strain. There it was. The old maternal tone. Calm enough to make him look unstable. Perhaps this is not the place. Lywin looked at her. You're right. A private room would be much more convenient for you. Levin stood on the raised dais but did not intervene. He could not. That was the point. Lywin gestured to the tribunal magistrate. Check the sequence. The magistrate took the bundle. Orental moved first, snatching a resin lamp from the table and throwing it toward the brazier. Rovin caught his wrist before the lamp left his hand. Guards surged in. The hall erupted. Yes, Lywin said. The room quieted. Those are real. Uriai looked at him but did not interrupt. Lywin faced the court. I altered Uriai Solin's invitation. I paid for false complaints against his laboratory. I bought access to registry records. I used a prohibited scent catalyst during the royal pairing rite. Levin's face remained controlled, but his hands closed at his sides. Lywin continued. Those acts were cruel. They were mine to answer for. Saren's confidence sharpened. Then Lywin lifted the access ledger. But these are not. He handed the magistrate the 7 later entries made under Kalis's stolen authorization. Uriai presented the clinic orders. Rovin presented dastral revisions. The archive clerk produced Levin's old protected custody decree and the altered transfer route bearing the Valor seal. The story changed in front of the room document by document. Saren's composure finally cracked when the transfer route was read aloud. You do not understand what that house would have lost. Her voice was low now, aimed at Kalis rather than the court. Everything I built protected you. Lywin stared at her. You arranged his death. He would have destroyed us. He was your son. He had become a liability. The words left her before she could call them back. Silence hit the conservatory. Lywin felt Kalis's old memories like distant pressure behind his ribs. A child standing still while Saren fixed his collar. A teenager repeating etiquette until his feet bled. A young Omega learning that affection arrived after success. Saren stepped toward him. I made you untouchable. I gave you beauty, education, influence. I positioned you beside the strongest alpha in the kingdom. Lywin shook his head. You gave me every future except one I was allowed to choose. Her face tightened. And what have you chosen? To shame your house for a king. Lywin looked at Levin, then back at her. No. I'm doing this because this is the first life that belongs to me. The magistrate ordered Saren and Orental detained. Tal began shouting about procedure. Saren said nothing. As guards escorted her away, she looked once at Kaelus's mating mark and then at Levin. The contempt there was almost easier to bear than love. The remaining Valar representatives were ordered to surrender registry access and house seals pending individual review. No mass punishment followed. Levin's reform specifically rejected inherited guilt, a decision that frustrated half the court and impressed the other half. Lywin spent the next 3 hours answering questions about his own crimes. It was not heroic. It was tiring, humiliating, and necessary. Uriai testified that Kaelus had voluntarily restored laboratory funds and provided access before the current accusations emerged. Rovan confirmed that Kaelus had refused to exploit royal authority to destroy the Dastral arrangement. The tribunal separated what Kaelus had done from what had been done through his name. He received formal censure, financial restitution orders, and a temporary suspension from House voting privileges rather than imprisonment. Lywin signed every page without complaining once. That worried Levin more than anything. Kaelus's appointment as crown mate happened 6 months later and caused far less drama than his withdrawal from the selection. There was no competition, no pairing right, no scent display. Levin asked in private. Lywin made him negotiate. "I'm not attending every banquet." Agreed. "No political meetings before breakfast." Agreed. "If a minister sends a report longer than 50 pages, someone else summarizes it." Levin frowned. 40. "You're bargaining in the wrong direction. I am still king, and I am still the person you allegedly want to live with." Levin sighed. 50. "Good." Lywin looked at him. "One more rule." "What?" "If either of us starts becoming the version of ourselves who thinks suffering proves we're responsible, the other person is allowed to interfere." Levin's expression softened. "Agreed." One winter evening, Levin returned from council to find Kaelus asleep across the long sofa in their sunroom. A stack of reports sat untouched on the table, one page serving as a coaster beneath a cup of tea. Levin removed his crown. "Kaelus." "Those were urgent." One eye opened. "I delegated them." "To whom?" "People who receive salaries for exactly this purpose." "You are crown mate." "Correct. Not crown accountant." Levin sat beside him, and Kaelus shifted automatically to make room. Outside, snow settled over the dark garden roofs. Inside, the room smelled of tea, pine, and fried dumplings Kaelus had clearly smuggled past dinner. Somewhere inside the life everyone called Kaelus, Lywin remembered the man who had once cursed a fictional villain for wasting wealth, freedom, and a perfectly good bed-chasing love that had to be forced. The old Kaelus had tried to become the perfect Omega so an Alpha King would have no choice but to want him. Lywin had ruined that perfection in a week. He had slept through etiquette, argued with a king, admitted ugly truths, repaired what he could, and finally stood up when running would have been easier. Levin lay down beside him and pulled him close. "Wake me for dinner," Kaelus muttered. "I thought you were sleeping. I can have priorities." Levin smiled into his hair. The kingdom survived the evening without them. Kaelus entered this world believing the safest thing he could do was stay out of the story. Instead, he found a man worth choosing, and uncovered the truth behind an ending he had misunderstood from the very beginning. If you enjoyed this version, the full Patreon edition goes much further. It includes the longer uncut relationship development, stronger chemistry, private scenes that were removed from YouTube, the complete mature 18+ raw intimacy and bonding sequence, and additional moments between Kaelus and Levin that you did not hear here. If you want the full experience and would also like to support my stories, open the video description and click the Patreon link below. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.